So let's talk about Domain 6, Security Assessment and Testing. Or you may hear it designing, performing, and analyzing security testing. So some key areas we're going to talk about. Assessment and test strategies, security control testing, collect security process data, analyze and report test outputs, and conduct or facilitate internal and/or third-party audits. So a lot of things we've talked about so far. So we're going to do a quick review here of some of these key areas. So first off, assessment and test strategies. When it comes to assessment and testing out your security strategies of what you have in your organization, what is it that you do when it comes to your security strategies compared to what this other company or this other organization does? Are you better prepared? Are you not as prepared? Are you pretty equal? Things we need to think about. How do we get prepared? Like, we could look at the industry standards, see what everybody else is doing. There's nothing wrong with that, to see what a company does. Sometimes you can ask. Sometimes that information may not be quite as shared because they don't want you to know what they've done to lower their attack surface necessarily, because that may introduce vulnerabilities. And they may be thinking, well, you're social engineering me or whatever. But if you have peers, colleagues in the industry, which a lot of us do, right? I mean, we get to know people, we learn people. We ask them what they do. Just talk casually. You have to, oh, I need a checklist of everything you have because I need to mirror everything you're doing because you have a great security posture. Well, you don't know that for sure, but look at the industry standards. See what the guidelines, recommendations they have or what they do for their security strategies. Obviously, we're going to follow laws and regulations. If we are regulated to follow a specific security strategy, we need to make sure we're doing that, like HIPAA, the financial laws, the personal information like healthcare. I mentioned HIPAA, but there are laws and regulations that we're going to have to follow. Now, some, like my small office, home office, right? I don't have those types of laws and regulations I have to follow. Computer crime laws and things like that. Normal laws, yes, but I don't have specific laws for my specific type of business. We need to evaluate test plans. We're going to have a test plan of our security strategies. Evaluate that and the procedures that are going to be applied during development, any operational testing that we have for our security strategies. Work with vendors, work with resellers. Again, that kind of goes back to the industry standards. If you can work with vendors and resellers on security controls and security strategies and security standards that are in the field nowadays, you can get some good feedback. Yes, you may have to pay them for their opinions or suggestions or recommendations. They may come in and help you do security audits and let you know best practices for security strategies to keep you more secure. Work in a team to design and develop your strategies. Don't put the onus all on you. I'm sure you are very intelligent, right? You're taking a very high-level course right now, but you don't need all that pressure on you. If, you are the only one, if you're the IT team by yourself and now you're in charge of security, yes, a lot of it's going to fall on you, but you need a team, at least one other person, a soundboard, bounce ideas off of, get their opinion. If you don't have that, this is when you may need to reach out to vendors, reach out to those peers, get those industry standards again. So it's not all on you. I don't know how else to really word that, but get you a team to help you design and develop out those security strategies for your organization. So some of that security control testing we can do. Now, the first one, and probably one that's extremely popular, I guess I can say, is a vulnerability assessment. We know vulnerabilities are what? What's another name for vulnerabilities? That's right, a weakness. So we can do a weakness assessment to see where our weaknesses are inside of our organization. Now, those weaknesses could be in our network. Those weaknesses could be on our systems. Those weaknesses could be in our applications, could be in our policies. But we have to do a vulnerability assessment to find those weaknesses. And there's different ways we can do vulnerability assessments, like for policies and for procedures. We could, ask people, do you know what this policy is? Can you explain the procedures to me? Go through and see what people know about the policies. If you have a policy that says, do not click on email link or links inside of emails from individuals you don't know, or from individuals outside the company, or don't click on links in emails at all, and then you turn around and formulate a pretend phishing email with a hyperlink in the email, and you blast it out to the company. And now 50% of your people click on that link because you have email tracking in there. You can go back and say, well, that's a huge vulnerability right there, because the vulnerability is they need training and awareness, and they also need training and follow-up awareness on our policy. Do they even know that that's our policy? Much less just the wrong thing to do, but now they're not even following policy. We can do a vulnerability assessment with automated tools as well. And what I mean by automated is they go out and do the scans on their own. You have to configure it a little bit. It's not like you take it out of the box and turn it loose. But you install applications like Nessus, GFI LandGuard, OpenVAS, Saint, Retina, and there's hundreds of them out there. But and I just listed out a couple that I could think of off the top of my head. But they're very popular. All right, Nessus is probably one of the most popular ones out there. But it's enterprise level scanning, and you install it and you can scan your network and your systems, your servers, your websites, your web applications for vulnerabilities. It will go through and try to see where any weaknesses are inside of your system. And it will tell you, it will give you a detailed report on what vulnerabilities that it found. And I'm thinking last time I checked, Nessus did about 70,000 different vulnerabilities, or give or take. A GFI LandGuard is actually built off of Nessus because Nessus used to be free. It's not anymore. GFI LandGuard is. Let me backtrack just for a second. Nessus does have a free copy you can use at home, but it has limitations on what it can do as far as the number of IPs, number of devices you can actually scan. So they're always updating these vulnerability scanners as well, because new weaknesses come out, right? So they take these updates and they will implement them, and then you need to do periodic vulnerability assessments. It's not like, you start a company, you run a vulnerability scan, and you think, okay, we're good. Look at that. We don't have any weaknesses. But next quarter, you may. Next year, you will. In 5 years, you're already exploited, and you may not know it. So vulnerability scans are super important. And you need to have a rotation. You need to have a plan in place of when you're going to do these scans, who's going to do them, where the results are going to be, how you're going to report them, so on and so forth. Do your vulnerability scans. Now, if you need to take it one step further and say we need to scan for vulnerabilities, we're looking for these weaknesses, but now we want to see how far we can exploit these weaknesses. Now we can do what's known as a penetration test or a pen test. Because now, not only do we know that's a weakness, there's a weakness over here, I can see the vulnerability. They don't have a Windows Update patch or Windows Update on this box over here. So a penetration test will then take an exploit and try to exploit that vulnerability to gain unauthorized access. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to gain unauthorized access and then go in and delete the hard drive or steal information. We're going to get in just like a hacker would on our attacker. And once we're in, we're in. We can do whatever. But in a penetration test, as a white hat hacker, you're going to come back out of the system, not do anything malicious, but you're going to document that. Workstation 104, vulnerability, this, penetration test, successful. You'll have that in your report, and you'll present that to the company. Or you can do this internally. You can do your own penetration testing as well. So usually when you do a penetration test, you're going to come in as a white box or a black box pen test. Either you know everything there is to know about that company as far as IP addresses, their platforms, what security they already have in place, or a black box test where you don't know anything about the company other than your person that contacted you. You may know the name of the company, and you may know something about it, like if it's a bank or a department store or electronic or whatever they do. But as far as their platforms, their IP schemes, their DNS, what operating, everything, you might not know any of that. So that's a black box test. Now, when you do a penetration test, first off, you're going to do footprinting, right? You're going to do some footprinting to find out, some discovery to find out everything about that company. You may do web searches. You may call on the phone and do some active footprinting. You're interacting with them. You may visit the company and ask for a tour. They may not know who you are. They probably don't. Just the person that contacted you is going to know who you are. So see if you can take a tour or whatever. A lot of footprinting involves looking up sources on the web, financial data, job postings, mapping websites, news websites. You're going to find out everything you can to look for weaknesses in that corporation. Then you may go in and do some scanning, right? So you can maybe get in, scan the network, do like a ping sweep or port scan with tools like Nmap, right? So you can see what computers are out there. You can see what ports are open, which ones are going to talk back to you. You can do some enumeration, maybe get more information. You're trying to pull information off these systems now as far as like banner grabbing. You can telnet into port 80 and see if you can find out what kind of operating system the web server is running. Is it an IIS? Is it Apache? We're trying to elicit some information from them. And then once we get done with the enumeration, then we can really start to launch attacks. We can start formulating our attacks and go into a hacking phase. So we know the devices that are out there with our port scan from our scanning. We know which doors are open. We did some enumeration so we can narrow it down and say, well, they're only running Windows operating system or Microsoft operating systems inside of this facility. So that eliminates all of our Linux, Mac OS exploits that we might run at this particular company. So we can become Windows oriented now. So we know that. So we start our hacking phases. We start to try to social engineer them. We try to do session hijacking, some IP spoofing, maybe try to transfer the DNS zone, things like that. All of that could be part of our penetration test. We're also going to pen test their applications, see if we can break their web applications, see how far we can get in, maybe do some cross-site scripting or try to do a SQL injection attack or that cross-site request forgery. Pen tests take a long time, and this just having one bullet really doesn't do it justice, but that is part of our security control testing. And you can do your own pen testing inside of your organization with tools like Backtrack, which is now Kali Linux, just as an example. Free distribution of Linux. You can download that and use that. It has built-in tools for penetration testing. You can do it in your home. There's nothing says you can't do that. You can do it in your own organization as long as the organization knows you're doing this. Don't penetration test. Don't run vulnerability scans on networks that are not yours. All right, that's a no-no. that's a computer crime. All right, do not scan networks that do not belong to you unless you get written permission from the owner of that network or somebody that can speak for that network, like the company owner or the CIO that might have requested you come and do this pen test. We can also do log reviews. Now, we know a log is a record of events, usually events that are occurring in our systems, our servers, our network. Somewhere in the organization, we have things happening, these events. Remember we talked about events and incidences, right? An event is just something that is happening, right? A log on, a log off, object access, restart of the server. All of those are events. They're not necessarily an incident. Now these logs, all these collection of logs that we get are made up of log entries. So every time we say, go look at the log, that's just the depository or repository for all the log entries. When we say we want to look at the log, we can go look at it and we get a list of all the entries, and then we can look at the specific entries for those events. So things we have to think about. Who has access to the logs? Are they on a syslog server? We talked about SIM earlier. Or is everything being aggregated to one location? Is there a particular server admin that needs to take care of this? Where are those logs going to be stored? How often are they reviewed? Is it somebody's job to look at them every morning? Or is it somebody's job to look at them all day? Or every other day? Or on Monday morning? What type of information is logged? What kind of auditing do we have turned on? Do we have successful and failure audits for just about everything? Or do we care just about failures? Do we care about successful logon attempts? I've worked for system admins that they log everything. Successful and failed logon attempts, successful and failed interactive logons, everything. And the logs get huge. And if they want all that information, that's up to them. It would be up to you and your organization. What can we use the log entries for? Why are we keeping this, right? Again, it's on your organizational policies of what are you going to use it for? To me, I don't know that I necessarily need successful logon attempts. Failed logon attempts, that does interest me a little bit more. But if you're successfully logging on, not as much. However, we could use that for, say, accountability and auditing, or if we have that auditing turned on and there is a breach, now I know who logged on that system. So again, you'd have to go in and see and analyze the risks and find out what it is you want to put in your audit logs. You can have synthetic transactions. So this is, if you think about like web applications, right? You may have developers, they create you a web application and they stick it out there on the web server. So it's out on the web server, but they're testing it, right? They're putting some synthetic transactions, they're using some scripting to emulate real users using your application. Now they're not trying to break it necessarily, but they're trying to make sure like the data flows are right. If I log in here, does it take me to the right page? If I do something here, does it take me to the right page, right? Is the programming logic, does it match up with what we had in our head and our plan with what we actually coded? So they're not intentionally trying to put in bogus data, like that would be fuzzing, but they're trying to put it through synthetic transactions, false users, to see what will happen when we put real users against it. That way, instead of having 100 or 500 users come and test our product or test our web application, we have this scripting to emulate them to make sure that it flows the way it's supposed to flow. You also might have some code review and testing. We're going to have this. If you have developers in your organization, you may have people that do code reviews. You can actually do this in penetration testing or vulnerability scanning as well. It can be part of one of those two processes. So again, we can have black box or white box testing. If it's black box testing, I don't know anything about that application other than you gave me a copy and I need to see what I think about it. I'm going to review it and test it to see if it works properly. If it's white box testing, I might have been part of the development team or part of the planning team. I may know what it's supposed to do. I may know how it's supposed to act. I may know a lot about the code that you've put into it. So I'm going to do a review and test it to see. You can do manual or automatic testing, right? I can go through, just like I was talking about, and I can test it myself. That would be manually, right? I'm putting it on a system, and I'm taking care of that. Or we could do automatic testing, run it through some type of application or program to test that for us. It can go through and scrub the code for what it thinks are coding errors and let us know. You could have a misuse case testing. This is if there's an error, did we handle it properly? Like, are we trapping for errors? Instead of we created an application, we developed something, and now there's an error, did it just crash? Or did it crash the system? We don't want that to happen, obviously. We want to make sure we're handling mistakes properly. We're not perfect, and I'm by far not the world's best coder or application developer. I guarantee it, I would make tons of mistakes trying to do this. So a misuse case test would be great for me, because if I'm coding and creating an application and there's an error in there, I typed a function wrong or whatever, I don't want it to crash the system. I want it to capture that error, notify, say, I'm sorry, there was an error here or whatever the case may be, and that way I'm handling it better. I can always go back and fix that. And then interface testing. This is conducting to evaluate whether systems or components, if they pass data and pass the control correctly to one another. So not necessarily the interface like what we see, but how the components inside of an application, how they interface together, how the information flows from, say, one module to another module inside of your programming logic. So how they're interfaced together is what we want to test. So can we pass data from here to here? And then if we do that, the data's over here, but what if the control, the mechanisms for manipulating the application don't move with it? And the control, what if it stays over here? Well, we've got a broken program, so it's not going to work properly. So we want to make sure that the control passes from module to module or object to object inside of our application. Now we can also collect security process data. So account management. When it comes to account management, do we have our eyes on the accounts? Are we going through doing our due diligence to see who has what? We need to look for those privilege escalations. Be like, well, Steve's got administrative rights, and we're not real sure why he does, because he's not an administrator. Somehow his privileges got escalated. So we need to make sure we're getting in and finding out why. We also need to talk about revocations. They got fired, they quit, or they're on vacation. Sometimes you can revoke rights while they're on vacation or temporarily disable an account. If they got demoted, you can revoke their rights as well. So we need to make sure we have our eyes on those accounts so they are set, the permissions, the authorizations are set the way they need to be. We could have management review. We always need management involved. I know that may sound like, well, they're just going to do this and do that, and they're not going to give me the freedom, and that may be true. However, they do have the organization's view, right? They got a better view of the organization. They got the best interest of the organization in mind. All right, they're not out to get you necessarily, so don't look at it like that, but we need to have management involved in the process. So let them review our procedures. Again, we don't need to put it on a super technical level, but let them see our procedures. They're going to see our requests because more than likely they'll be reviewing and approving budgeting, and they can either approve or deny our requests that we are going to make them aware of. We can have key performance and risk indicators. Now, performance indicators, they tell us how well we're doing or how well we're not doing, I guess, if you want to look at it like that. Are we meeting the goals that we set for our processes, for our security strategies? So think about metrics when you think about key performance or risk indicators, right? How are we measuring those indicators? How are we getting there? Well, this is our key performance indicator here, but we're down here. Our metrics say, we're climbing and we're almost there. So we're going to use metrics to measure this, or success or failure, whichever way you want to look at it. And then backup verification data. Test your backups, right? Verify the restore process. Don't take for granted that because the backup process ran successfully, the data was backed up properly. Yes, you didn't get an error. There's no error in the system log. There's no error in the syslog server. So yeah, I feel good. The backup ran. But do a test restore on not on a production environment, but on a development server somewhere, right? Take that backup that you just created or the system created for you and try to restore it on a development machine. If it comes up and you see your data and that's the way it's supposed to be, then yes, you do have a 99% feel good about that. But until you test it, yeah, you're taking that computer and that procedure, that system, you're taking their word for it if they're speaking to you, right? You're taking whatever it's saying in that log that it ran successfully, but it may be copying blank data. Till you do that restore, till you verify that backup, you're never really going to know. And then training and awareness. Get people trained up. I've mentioned this in every domain up until this point of training and user awareness. Have a well-written, understandable policies in place that outline our procedures for our organizational staff. They need to know all the policies, but just because we create the policy, we have to train them on the policy. Let them know what the policy is, what it's for, why we have it, what happens if they don't follow it. Explain that to employees. Don't just hand them a bunch of papers and say, well, this is our policy, you better follow it, or you might get fired. Explain that to them. Email policy. They may not understand. It says complexity requirements, or our password policy states that all passphrases have to have complexity requirements. But then you don't give an example, or you don't explain that. Some people may not understand that. A lot of people are not technical folks, and you may be thinking, that's not real technical there, man. And you may be right for us, but if you think about somebody that's not very technical, or they just use computers to do their job and they don't really care about that much about them, they may not know what complexity requirements are. They might think, well, it's got to be really long. So explain. We have to train them. Explain what's going on. We can analyze and report test outputs. So once our assessments are completed, we've done our assessments, we've seen what's going on, we want to analyze the outputs to make sure the metrics are where we need them. Are we reaching where we're supposed to be reaching? Are we getting to those key performance indicators, or do we have some risk indicators that says, wait a minute, we've got some problems coming down the road. We foresee these problems. So we have to analyze the outputs to make sure we're going down the road that we need to be going down. So are we meeting our stated goals for security posture? Because again, we want to stay small, lower that attack surface, harden our systems. We want to be secure. We have to analyze the metrics, the outputs, to see where we are. And we might have to report the outputs to everyone or anyone requiring access to them, like team leads, right? If we're doing this reporting for them, we're going to have to give it to a team lead. Executive teams, upper management perhaps, maybe the public. We might have to notify the public, our stakeholders, of what's going on inside of our organization. We can conduct internal or facilitate some third-party audits. Now, conducting internal audits, we want to do that on a regular basis. And when I say regular, I don't mean daily or weekly, maybe quarterly, twice a year, maybe once a year, whatever fits your company's policies or your organizational policies. But we want to make sure we're keeping in line with our stated security goals. Just because we're doing an audit, that doesn't mean we just go, way out in left field somewhere with what we're trying to check. We have security goals. We have purposes for doing this. When we do this audit, we're going to maintain and follow those security goals. We're going to look at our policies. Is everybody following policies and procedures? The policies and procedures we have may affect access control, password policies, user acceptable usage policies. Do we have people doing social media when they're supposed to be working, for example? Right? Are they taking too many breaks? Is somebody using the back door when they're only supposed to be coming in and out the front door? Access control. We talked about the escalation of privileges. All of this stuff we're going to go through and audit. All right. Now, audits, they do take a while. So plan accordingly. It's not something you just come in one morning and think I'm going to do an audit today. All right. Now, if you're going to do a specific audit on say a specific web application, that may be something you can do off the cuff like that. Be like, well, we've been running into some problems. I'm going to audit this and find out if everything is in place the way it's supposed to be. But as far as auditing your policies and procedures, that may take you more than a day. We can also have third-party audits. We can get another perspective, if you will, or if we're required by law to do so. You may have to have a third party come in because of the way your organization operates. So if we're facilitating this, right, that would be the facilitating of the third party. They're doing it, but you may be with them during the process because they may have questions, and more than likely they will. You don't want them to have to hunt you down. Usually an audit process, it's when people hear that, they cringe, right? They say, oh no, an audit's coming. I'm going to get in trouble, right? Because, auditors, they don't usually find, they're not looking for necessarily the right thing. They're looking for things you're not doing right. And we're just as guilty of that for internal audits, right? We're not looking at everything. And when we go to somebody or whatever and we see they're following every policy and procedure, we don't say, hey, it's a good job, thank you. We're just like, yep, nothing's wrong, and we move on, right? Because we're always looking for something wrong. We're kind of not very nice when it comes to that kind of stuff. And that's what we think of when it comes to audits. People cringe. So you're going to be with them. You're going to facilitate this audit. While you're doing that, you want to ensure the proper scope and tailoring to get appropriate number of controls at the correct level for the particular target system. So be there so you can ensure that scoping and that tailoring. That way they don't get too far off and they stay on task when it comes to the audit as well. It's going to be a little more fair for them. It'll be a little more fair for you and the organization as a whole. We want to establish a security baseline through annual audits. So we're going to do these audits and establish a security baseline. And that may change from year to year. Be like, hey, well, we're here this year. Maybe we have different applications, different vulnerabilities, different threats. So now that baseline is going to change. We're going to spell out our objectives. Let everybody know what they are. Don't keep them secret. And I'm saying everybody on our team. Choose auditors with real security experience. Don't just go the latest and greatest. Don't just jump for the cheapest when it comes to third parties. All right, this is one of those you get what you pay for kind of things sometimes. So be careful with what you're doing here. So, ask them questions. Be like, well, because they're going to contact you first, or you can contact them and say, hey, we need an annual audit for such and such. I see on your website you've got 25 years experience. Could you tell me a little more about that? And they should be more than happy to share that with you. Not necessarily results, but well, we've been in the business for this long, we've done this many and this and this and this, and just because they've been in the business 25 years doesn't mean they've been successful. Probably, since they've stayed around that long. But how many audits do you do a year? Do you do 2? So they've only done a handful. So things like that, we have to ask. Involve business unit managers early on so they know what's coming. Again, people think of audits, they're like, Get those unit managers, get those team leads involved. Make sure your auditors rely on experience and not just checklists. Goes back to the choosing them with real security experience. If they have real experience, yes, they may have a checklist. They may have things to keep them on track. But at the same time, they have intuition. They have experience. And they can bring that into the audit, which is going to be better for you. They may find a couple more things that's not on the checklist, but that's only going to make you stronger as an organization. So don't always look at audits as a bad thing. Yes, it makes you feel bad at first. You think, man, they found this and this is not very, man, we're just not doing very good, right? And you take that personally as a security professional. I know I do. When people find things, I'm just like, oh, right? It makes you mad. But learn from your mistakes and make your organization, make your security posture stronger. So also insist that the auditor's report reflects your organization's risks. So you can take that report and you can apply that to management and show them the risks. So now you have something, the auditors are kind of on your side now. You say, well, these are our risks. You said the auditors agree with me. We need to get better controls to get these threats under control. So that's going to help you as well. So that does it for Domain 6. We talked about assessment and test strategies, security control testing, collect security process data, analyze and report test outputs, and conduct or facilitate internal and third-party audits.